In Activity 4, Wind, students discuss wind as moving air. They use a wind vane to determine wind direction and then observe wind strength. Finally, they rate wind speed by applying a simple wind scale to their observations. You will need the following materials from the kit. Activity Sheet 4, Parts A and B. Wind scales. A compass. A laminated United States map. Erasable markers. Masking tape. The wind scale poster. And the wind vane. You will also need to provide crayons or colored pencils and an electric fan. To prepare for Session 1, make a copy of Activity Sheet 4, Part A for each student. Begin Session 1 as early as possible in the school day. Set up an electric fan so that all students can feel a breeze, and then post the laminated wall map of the United States. Find a location for placing the class wind vane outside. You will want to mount it as high as possible in an open area where it can catch the wind and rotate freely. Assemble the wind vane according to the instructions in the package. You will need a compass for orienting the wind vane. To begin Session 1, turn on the fan and allow time for everyone to feel the air, and explain that the fan is moving the air by blowing it. Ask students, what part of weather does this remind you of? Students will probably say that the blowing air reminds them of the wind. Explain that wind is moving air and that wind is an important part of weather because air is always moving across Earth's surface. Then, initiate a class discussion about wind. Students may say that they can feel wind when it blows. They can see wind when it moves things such as flags and tree branches. And they can hear it rustle leaves and rattle windows. Confirm that these are all ways of observing wind with the senses, feeling, seeing, and hearing. Explain that there are also ways to measure wind. Introduce a wind vane as a specially shaped tool for measuring wind direction, and that wind from different directions brings different kinds of weather. Bring students' attention to the wind vane. Students should notice the arrow showing direction and observe that it spins freely. They may infer that the wind makes it spin. Lead them to understand that the letters stand for directions: north, east, south, and west. Next, tell students that a windsock is another instrument used for observing wind direction. A windsock is shaped like a sock with the toe cut off, made of a lightweight fabric and attached to a pole. When the wind blows, it fills the sock. It also shows how strong the wind is by how straight it stands out from the pole. It is a simple but accurate weather instrument. When the wind is blowing, take students outside to the predetermined open area. Hold the wind vane high in the air and, using the compass, orient it so that the N points north. Wait until the wind vane stops spinning to indicate wind direction. Explain that the arrow is now showing where the wind is coming from. Back in the classroom, distribute Activity Sheet 4, Part A, and show students how to record their observations. Students will do this twice a day, morning and afternoon, for 3 days. At the end of the 3rd day, have students answer questions at the bottom of the activity sheet. Then, discuss their findings by asking, what did you notice about the wind direction over 3 days? They will see that wind direction may have changed from morning to afternoon and from one day to the next. Lead students to understand that winds are named for the direction from which they blow. Therefore, a north wind blows from the north. To conclude Session 1, review that wind direction is an important part of weather. Knowing where the wind is coming from helps us to know what the weather will be. To prepare for Session 2, make a copy of Activity Sheet 4, Part B, and the wind scale for each student. Set up the electric fan on a table. Each team of 2 will need some crayons or colored pencils. To begin Session 2, turn on the fan and let students feel it. Test if the fan can move a book by putting a book on the table in front of the fan. When students observe that the air is not blowing hard enough to move the book, ask, "What do you think our indoor wind can move?" Test different objects such as small papers, loose clothing, and so on. Introduce students to the idea that objects blown by the wind can be used to observe how strong the wind is. Tell students that many years ago, a ship captain named Beaufort came up with a way to describe wind speed by observing the way that ships acted in the wind. The Beaufort wind scale is used by scientists to rank wind speed or wind strength on a scale of 0 to 12. However, a simplified scale of 0 to 3 is more appropriate for this age. Distribute a copy of the wind scale to each student and display the wind scale poster. Explain that the pictures show the effects of wind on some common outside objects, and along with each picture is a number and description of the wind. Tell students that the numbers are used to rate the wind speed or how strong the wind is. Finally, distribute a copy of Activity Sheet 4, Part B to each student. Have students observe wind conditions by going outside or looking through the window. Help them apply the wind scale to their observations by looking at an object affected by the wind, such as a flag, and comparing it to the flag on the scale. Have students work in pairs to observe and rate the wind strength twice a day, morning and afternoon, for 3 days. After students have completed 3 days of observations, ask them, "What did you notice about the wind strength over 3 days?" Students should have noted that wind strength changes during the day and from one day to the next. Tell students that in Activity 5, Clouds, they will find out about another important part of weather, clouds. For science background, reinforcement activities, curriculum connections, and information about the Delta Science Reader, please consult your DSM Teacher's Guide.